All right, everyone. Welcome to another session of Lens with Advanced Design. I am a guest moderator today. My name is Dominic Montante, and I'm an industrial designer based out of Toronto, Canada. And today we have with us a very special guest, Rotimi Solola. So Rotimi, if you guys don't know, is an award-winning industrial designer and educator. With experience in both consultancy and corporate environments, he has contributed to the successful launch of multiple products. Rotimi runs a Chicago-based design studio, Show Design LLC, and is a visiting instructor with the University of Illinois at Chicago. So before becoming an independent designer, Rotimi worked as a member of the Motorola Mobility design team, which actually is where I had the great opportunity of interning with him. And he acquired a lot of information and knowledge about bringing products to market there. And I can tell you firsthand that you really learn a lot about the product development process in a corporate environment. Outside of designing and teaching, Rotimi stays involved in the design community by giving public lectures, much like this one, judging design competitions, and mentoring. So everyone give a big welcome to Rotimi, and I encourage you guys to just start filling out the question and answer box as soon as you can so we can start to queue those up. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, hey everybody, that was awkward. Hey everybody, let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so if you can grant me permission to share so I can put this presentation up. Give me one. Okay, great. Awesome. All right, let's go into full screen. And I'm hopefully you all can see this in full screen mode. So thank you, Dom, for that amazing introduction. I'm happy to be joining Lens. Really appreciate being granted this opportunity to speak in front of you all. So my name is Rotimi Solola. I'm Nigerian, so that's why the long name, but most people just call me Rotimi, so that works just fine. I'm an independent industrial designer, visiting instructor at UIC, and founder of Show Design. And I guess it's maybe a little weird saying independent industrial designer because most recently I've been doing a lot more work with other designers and collaborations and things like that. So just trying to grow my practice. So I want to jump right into it. So the topic of today's discussion is really revolving around personal investment and how that can lead to success in the industrial design or even probably just the general design career. And so one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you get work? And I guess I should give a quick disclaimer before I get into things. You know, this presentation is really specifically just my views and my opinions and what's worked for me. So generally speaking, hopefully you know, there's some things that may work for, you know, other people, but I can only give this presentation from my perspective. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you get work? So a lot of this presentation is just kind of going to be going back to this question. A little bit about my background. Some of you may or may not be familiar, but I'm a huge sketching enthusiast, whether that's sketching on paper with a ballpoint pen or digital sketching. That's really where I found my passion for industrial design. And it's been, you know, a long journey, a long process, you know, since just dabbling in high school through college and now professionally. And you know, having the opportunity to teach at UIC has been really great because I essentially get to do more of the thing that I love doing. So these are just some of the concepts and practice sessions that I might do on my own time. And really, what sketching, you know, has done for me as an industrial designer, I think It's a great tool. A lot of you are familiar. It's a great tool for really exploring ideas and solving problems. But I like to take it a step further. I like to take my time and not just ideate and explore, but I like to refine on paper as long as possible, because I feel like this sort of slow sketching really creates the most aesthetic solutions. There's something about, marking up the page, very similar to carving out a piece of clay that you have full command over the canvas. And that's really why I tend to gravitate towards sketching, and that's really how I kicked off my career. So my first job outside of graduating from UIC, where I studied, was as an industrial designer on the Motorola consumer experience design team. And this right here was a product that I worked on with the team at Motorola. I believe Dom also worked on this project while he was interning with us, so that was really cool. And this was this was the second generation mod phone. It was a modular platform phone where you could attach various add-ons to the phone to expand the functionality. And this particular one utilized a POLED display, which allowed it to essentially be dropped, countless times without shattering. And I had the amazing opportunity to work with this project and take it all the way through manufacturing and go to China and just kind of learn a lot and contribute to the legacy of Motorola. So that was really exciting. And once I left the company, I decided to start my own practice. It was really important to me to start show design and begin to work with various clients and also work on my own projects. So some of the work that we've done at show design over the years can be seen here. Do a lot of tech products, a lot of consumer electronics, or even fitness technology, and then as well as precision goods, things that require CNC manufacturing, injection molded plastics, as well as sometimes quick, fun little animation projects, such as the one you see here. That was for Hinoki knife brand. They just launched their Kickstarter, and it's been wildly successful. This is their second launch, I think. And I had the amazing opportunity to do a few little animations for their company. So just sort of creative work across the board. So back to this question, and I'm gonna just cut to the chase and start my two-part answer. So 50%, relatively speaking, of the work that I do comes from referrals. So these are people that maybe I've worked with in the past, or even interned with, or at least maybe I met one time in my life, or multiple times, and they pass work on to me. So that's been great. So you might be wondering, what about the other 50%? And that's really where I'm going to focus the bulk of this presentation, is talking about that other 50%. And so that is as a result of investments. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about why I'm using this term investment and the one of the dictionary definitions of this word. So an act of devoting time, effort, or energy to a particular undertaking with the expectation of a worthwhile result. And to me, this definition is, I guess it's fairly straightforward, but typically we think about investments as a monetary thing. You put some money in, you take some money out, in the future. And it kind of is the same exact thing, except it can also relate to the amount of time and energy that you devote to what you're doing. And I wanted to highlight worthwhile result here because it is something that doesn't happen overnight. In many instances, it may take years to bear fruit. So with investments, you're essentially just planting seeds. You're doing a lot of stuff today for hopefully a positive outcome tomorrow. And so obviously we can invest our money and we can invest our time And typically there's a relationship between the two. If you have a lot more money, you can probably afford to spend less time on things. And if you have maybe a lot less money, you probably have to put a lot more time into things. You can't just maybe hire somebody or pay for the thing to get done. So it can be a spectrum, and it can be a tipping scale depending on who you are and where you are in your development. But I think it's just important to know that I believe the best investments are a combination of both. I don't think it's enough to just throw money at a problem and sit back, or devote all your time with it and not invest monetary value into it. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So 3 forms of investment that I want to highlight would be education, workspace, and projects. And when we talk about education, I mean, this could be going to university, but it can also be a little bit more broad. Things like lectures and going to conferences, YouTube videos and Lynda tutorials, mentorships and internships. These are all forms of education, and they all vary from very expensive to even free in some cases. So I believe that the best educations are a combination of multiple things, not just going to expensive university, but even if you're at university, what are you doing to further your education on other avenues? And I think that can really help create a well-rounded individual. I want to talk a little bit about workspace. This is something that didn't occur to me until much later after graduating from college. And the workspace is a really good point for investing in. This traditionally might be an office or a studio, a physical space where you go to, maybe you're leasing or renting. And oftentimes this can be relatively expensive depending on the location that you're in. However, I want to take a broader outlook on this term workspace, because workspace, I believe, can really be the technology that you use, the software, the equipment, the lighting. Your workspace could be as simple as a corner of your house or a corner of your room, which you've dedicated that area for working. Okay, so I think this sort of current COVID-19 situation that we're in has really broadened a lot of people's perspective on what it is to have a workspace. And I think it requires investment of potentially money if you're buying furniture that makes you comfortable for working, but also an investment of time and creatively thinking, how can I optimize my workspace? And the way that I would encourage investing in the sort of a workspace is to ask yourself, is this thing that I'm getting ready to do, is it going to allow me to work for 30 more minutes? You know, is it going to allow me to work for 2 extra hours? Because you want to be in a situation where there are no barriers to your creativity. So if you're using a mouse or something that's really not ergonomic and you're cramping up after 20 minutes, that's going to hinder your creative process. And personally, uninterrupted creativity is extremely important. Having 5 to 6 hours where I can just pour my ideas out on the page. And so the workspace can be a huge enabler to that. And finally, projects, which we're probably going to spend most of the rest of the presentation discussing. And with projects, we can invest, our money, our time, and our effort. And I highly encourage that we invest all of these things in the projects that we're working on. So I'm gonna move on, and we're gonna sort of uncover that as we go. So in this slide, I'm basically showing that to achieve good results with the projects that you're working on, I believe that it's going to be a combination of investing in your education, right? Whether you're in school or even outside of school, how are you furthering the knowledge and the concepts that you're learning and exploring? And also combined with your workspace. So the more optimized your workspace is for you, and the more education that you have around the subject matter or just in general, I believe the better the results you're going to get in the projects that you're working on. At least that's what it's been for myself. So back to this question. really, on the one hand, it's been through referrals, and on the other hand, we can sum it up and really just say the portfolio, my portfolio specifically. Okay, but in reality, it's all investments. Whether you're investing in your network and the people that make up that network, or whether you're investing in the projects that you do, it's really all investments. But again, I'm going to focus on projects for the rest of this. And so there's this notion that the more you do, the more you get, and this couldn't be more true in my personal life, and hopefully some of you have experienced this as well. It seems so simple and so straightforward, but a lot of times when we look back and we notice maybe things aren't progressing like we would like them to in our lives, I think it's a good time to ask, okay, well, how much have I done, up until this point, or how much am I doing, or how much can I do? Do I have more to give? And I think that really this concept, it couldn't be more true for my life. So on the notion of the more you do, the more you get, I've worked on a ton of projects in the last few years, and some really exciting projects, mostly in the tech space. However, you're gonna have to take my word for it, because I can't share the work with you. So that's censorship for you. But while you can take my word for these projects, they're really amazing. Trust me. I'm not able to discuss them publicly. So that leaves me in a bit of a dilemma, with this sort of question mark hanging over my head as to, well, I guess it's best phrased like this. If doing work gets you more work, then how can I get more work if I can't share the work that I'm currently working on? Stress face emoji, right? So this is the story of the last few years of my life, right? Starting a consulting practice and getting my hands into a lot of different projects doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to share it with the entire world and show everyone, what you're working on. And the challenge with this is, half of my work comes from being able to talk about the work that I've done. So if over the last 3 years, I can't actually talk about any of that work, then how can I pull in more work for the business? And so this is where the term personal investment comes in, and why I, put the title of my talk is why personal investment is critical to design success. And really, as I present the rest of this, I want you all to understand that this can be personal investment whether you are an employee or seeking employment, whether you are seeking an internship, or whether you're starting a business or in the middle of the crazy world of business. I think this applies to all of that. It's not a specific scenario. Obviously, I'm going to tell it from my lens here. See what I did there? Okay, so personal investment. The reason this is so important is it's extremely important for you to prove yourself. Just like I may not be able to share a lot of the work that I've been doing, I have to share something. It's not enough to get in front of a room of people, potential clients, and tell them, hey, I'm the person for this job, but you're going to have to take my word for it. I mean, ask yourself this: are you going to hire that individual if they just say, hey, trust me, we're gonna get this done for you? No, you want to see something, and so it's really important that we create opportunities to prove ourselves, because at the end of the day, no one will invest in you if you haven't invested yourself. If you haven't invested in yourself. And this couldn't be more true. And the more time I spend in this industry, and the more senior I get, and the more opportunities of bringing on interns or working with freelancers or collaborating, the more I just see this statement in my everyday life. I mean, I've been in communications with clients that haven't invested in their own business enough, and that's a question mark for me. And that's something like, maybe I don't want to get into that, because you haven't done the groundwork to really, develop even a point of view on the product that you need help with. So I believe that even the people that we need to work with, we have to see that they've put something of their own time and of their own even money into the work that they're doing. And I think the easier it is for people to see that on you, for people to see that, yes, you've regardless of the opportunities that you've been given, you've found a way to create your own opportunities. And I think that speaks volumes. And that's what I look for when I work with interns. That's what I look for when I mentor people. That's what I look for when I collaborate with other designers, is how much have they invested in themselves, in their project, in their careers. And it really just comes down to doing the work. So as we talk about investing in yourself, it's really putting work, putting work forward and being active. So on that note, I've showed enough words on this presentation. I want to sort of move forward and start to show a couple of examples. And so I want to start with the Alt Pen project. Many of you might be familiar with this project, but you may not understand the underlying reasons of developing this project. So one of the probably the most obvious reason that any designer or creative or engineer or inventor might create a product is to solve a problem, okay? A problem that people are facing, or the problem that may be personal. So that's a given. So we're gonna put that off to the side and look at 4 other reasons why I decided to invest in this project. And so one of the reasons was timing. This was probably the #1 reason. I had just left my job at Motorola. I was getting ready to start teaching. I was living with my parents at the time. So everything was just, it was the right time to take a risk. And that was 2017. It was just the perfect time to take a risk, because if everything went wrong, at least I'd still have a roof over my head. And so that was one of the main reasons, sort of kicking the pants to launch this project. The second reason was I wanted to go to market. It was really important, after getting a taste for it at Motorola and working with certain freelance clients in the past and actually bringing a product to market, it was increasingly important for me to establish a portfolio of products that I had brought to market or helped bring to market. And I always would get a little frustrated when I would work with clients and they had this idea for a pair of socks, and 3 years of back and forth with the client, and they still haven't launched their sock. And that drove me crazy, because maybe I was a little naive, but I didn't think it took 3+ years to develop socks. And obviously it's not just socks. Sometimes it's a different product. But I wanted to prove to myself that I could launch a product, and that it wasn't going to take me 5 years to launch something of the more basic variety. Okay. The next reason for launching this project was I wanted to prove my business. So this sort of goes hand in hand with the previous one. And part of proving my business was about being able to show the clients that I work with, or the future clients that I would be working with, that I can do this, that I understand the process, and that the same process that I am proposing to help you with, I have done myself. And so I'm a big, supporter of it's really important for you to, especially if you have the desire to criticize something, it's really important for you to understand it and to go through the process yourself, because that builds your knowledge base, and it makes you so much more qualified to criticize the subject matter and even improve and make it better. And so because I had criticized the production times and how, it took 3 years for socks to make it to market sometimes, I knew that, okay, let me get behind the wheel, let me figure this stuff out and formulate my own opinions that way. Okay. And finally, it was a form of gathering more experience. And for me, it was a wealth of experience. I was fortunate enough to work with various individuals and companies that really helped during this journey. But at the end of the day, everything from the design to the prototyping to the manufacturing communication to customer service and procurement and QC and all of that really fell to me. And I think that was very stressful, still is. But I wouldn't trade any of that for anything. I would do it the exact same way every time, because what it did was it allowed me to put myself in the various shoes of an organization, a complex organization like Motorola with so many people, or other companies, and really scale it down on a smaller scale and understand what each discipline is doing, and then have to do it myself. Okay, so that builds a sort of empathy for these various jobs. And I think when you understand it, you can appreciate it better, and you're more informed in the future when you have to pay someone to do it. You know what they're going through. So I want to just kind of walk through and share some visuals. The process of Alt-Pen is the same process that I might have taken for any professional project. And really starting with the inspiration gathering, it had to do all with precision goods, and I knew it was going to be metal from the day one. So I was really trying to pull inspiration from aluminum and steel and the various premium metals. And the sketching process was a very long and gradual process, because this was sort of a side project, I guess you could say. And it just over time, it really ramped up. But in the beginning, it was just every now and again, I would drop a few sketches. And this is just an idea of a few of the sketches, but really trying to explore things that I could patent, things that were ownable and that were unique. From there, you all might be familiar, the prototyping phase was absolutely critical. When I couldn't sketch anymore, when I needed something physical, that's when I had to stop and start going into CAD and even building some paper mock-ups and things to understand what's the diameter, how does this interact with the magnets and things like that. And then sourcing manufacturing partners to work with. We developed several iterations of prototypes with them. I think a total of about 7 iterations by the end of the project. And so all of that to say that I was investing quite a bit of time in this project, but also my own money. And I think it's so important to put your money where your mouth is in this industry, because it gives you the opportunity to show the world what you can do. It's good to apply for a job and to prove yourself on that job. But if you can prove yourself before then, it just makes you that much more knowledgeable and that much more qualified. Okay, and so using some of the strengths that I have to really create a visual story of the product, and this was a tricky one because. This product is a very premium product. If you've seen it or held it in hands, I think you may appreciate it. But because this is sold exclusively online, e-commerce, it may be a hard thing to communicate to people. So that was another challenge of really making sure that the visuals could communicate the premium nature of the product. And just a real quick snippet. This was about a 2-year program. I mean, while I'm criticizing socks for taking so long, and that was an example. I never worked with anybody developing socks for 3 years. It's the first thing that came up in my mind. But I mean, this took 2 years for a pen. So I mean, you could have at me if you want. But it was, like I said, it was a wealth of knowledge going into this. And you'll notice that from the initial conception of the idea back in February of 2017, it took about 2 years before I broke even. And so just you know, it actually it took a while, but it's a very fulfilling process, and I gained just about everything that I wanted to gain from the experience. So the next project I want to just briefly touch over with you, and this is the last project before we move on to the Q&A. This was Shade, and so Shade was a project that actually Candace Carson initiated, and for those of you who may not be aware, she's my girlfriend, yes. And so she initiated this project. It was something that was very dear to her, green tea matcha. So, and that's really what the brand is all about. And so she started the design and the conception of this Shade brand, really based on the story of the way that this green tea matcha is grown. And it spends a good deal of its development process in the shade. And so that was really the motivation for this project. And so we looked at a lot of inspiration around shadow casting and things like that to start to create an overarching theme that we can pull in from the visual brand elements all the way through the packaging of the product and even the product itself. And so just that one thread we tried to pull in across the entire project. And so using various materials and finishes, really wanted to communicate this idea of shadow and depth. And so, you know, this was some of the guidelines for the brand that were developed. And if you're interested in this project or any other projects, the Behance page, you can look up show design or Rotimi Solola or Candace Carson, and you should find it a little bit more detail. But from there, we wanted to pull that same thread of the shadow and actually pull it into the photography and the way that the product was visualized. And this is not, I guess this is renderings that we compiled, but we created it with a photo mashup, some real photography blended with some digital rendering to really just tell that story. And that's really all it was about, was finding the right way to showcase the right image. And so you can see there's a lot of use of depth and natural materials and shadows and contrast. And these were really interesting areas that we wanted to use to communicate a premium packaging and a premium brand. And so we also developed sort of a set, that sort of a ceremonial set that you could interact with and just create this unboxing experience that was elevated. From there, we extracted the brand into various products. And we started with the matcha powder and then went over into sort of a cold latte that could be used on the go. And so we wanted to find creative ways of pulling that shadow story with the labels and the use of depth. One thing I'll just point out is if you notice the shade text casting a shadow onto the more opaque green tea inside. So those were the small little details that we really wanted to play up for the brand. And of course, you know, who doesn't like chocolate? We wanted to pull that sort of essence into green tea matcha chocolate. And so we wanted everything to feel distinct and different and unique, but still feel like it was coming from the same brand. And so that was the project in a nutshell. I know I kind of skimmed through that relatively quickly, but I wanted to leave some time for the Q&A. So in a nutshell, the two forms of investment, the two areas that bring in work for me and for my business have been referrals and the portfolio. And on that line, it's really been about investing in my network, in the people in my life, the people that I've worked with, keeping relationships alive and just friendships, really. I mean, I don't look at them as business transactions. I really just look at them as genuinely, you know, trying to keep in touch with various people, but also investing in the projects that I'm doing, because while I may not be able to share majority of the work that I work on, I have to find ways of creating opportunities for myself and for my business where I can, get to share my process, the same exact process that I would take with a client. I want to be able to do on my own personal projects. And so really this notion of the more you do, the more you get, that has just been an underlining theme for my career. And I think the reason that I call these things investments is it's a little bit more than just doing a sketch on the page. It's a little bit more than just, doing a nice rendering or doing a model. It's actually creating a project of the various things that you're doing and going deep to the best of your ability, to the extent of your knowledge, and using every single thing at your disposal to really make the project something special and something that represents what you value. And so I encourage everyone, regardless of age or experience level, invest in yourself, invest in your projects, and that should be time, it should be effort, and if you can help it, it should be money as well, because when you're able to put money behind something that you're working on, it means you probably really believe in that thing. And it tells clients that, or other people, it tells the world that, listen, this person is pouring money into themselves, into their projects. So that's an invitation, like, hey, yeah, we can give you our money too. So I think that's it. So I want to thank you guys for joining me on this conversation, and really looking forward to the Q&A. You can follow me on Instagram, Rotimi_Solola, and Show Design. And yeah, thank you. I guess I will stop.
Rotimi, that was excellent. I could not agree more with many of the points that you brought up in the talk. I think the Shade project especially is really cool because it kind of ties together everything that you spoke about when talking about investing in yourself. I think a lot of people, when they, you don't always have work to do. And so you kind of have a choice of like, what do I do with my time? Do I use that for leisure? Do I try to find more work? But I think that like doing your own personal project like that is a really great way to bolster your portfolio and kind of show off your skill set, especially when you can't really show off your skill set necessarily with your projects that you have. I did have a couple questions for you just on my own part. And actually one thing I wanted to say too is that the alt pen is currently open for vote for, it's nominated for a Everyday Carry Award.
Yeah. It's I think voting closes at the 26th, I think, of July. So that caught me off guard. I really wasn't expecting. I don't even know who nominated it, but that was pretty cool. So I've been sharing a little bit about that. So we'll see what happens. There are a lot of great brands on there. So.
Yeah, so if you guys want to support the alt pen, just go follow Show Design and then go to the link in the bio, click it, and you go to the website. There's a bunch of other like pens. Don't worry about them. Just click the alt pen, hit vote.
Exactly.
So that was great. One thing I wanted to follow up with was in the beginning of the presentation, you kind of mentioned, most of your work comes from referrals. And I was wondering, like, what tips could you give to the audience perhaps for networking and maybe for the people that haven't necessarily had the work experience or ability to gain contacts like that? What are some ways that they can network with other designers and kind of start to build that relationship to start getting referrals?
Absolutely. And it's such an interesting thing because one of the first referrals I got when I started doing this full time, I'll tell you, it's a short story, but I was leaving Motorola. I think it was actually the week that I was done at Motorola, and I was walking to the train station and I received a call, and it was from Mark, who was my former design director at Design Integrity when I was an intern So I was an intern as a sophomore, and he called me and was like, "Hey, listen, we're getting a little bit busy. Like, do you have time? Are you able to do some work for us?" I was like, "Well, funny you should ask. I'm literally on my way out of my current working situation. So yeah, I'm available." And that just came out of the blue, really. I mean, and that was a relationship that, I guess I fostered years ago. And, we just kept in touch, and I'd pop in at their holiday parties and things like that. Not because I was looking for anything, but because I really like those people. So I just wanted to stay in touch, and just, they were my mentors in a sense. So I think it's not always as prescriptive as you might think. I think it's just yeah, building friendships, having mentors, and the mentorship doesn't need to be, "Hey, can you be my mentor?" It can just form naturally. People that maybe are a little bit more knowledgeable than you are, helping you out, and giving you insight. Many of my clients today are actually, I would consider them mentors. And then I think to sort of another answer to that would be just try to meet as many people as possible, because then the chances of something manifesting is just greater. So if you only know one person in your life, then the odds of them, needing your help for something, or needing to hire you for something, is very low. But if you can multiply that, then your chances just go up from there.
I think the biggest call out from that is just, don't be weird, or don't go in with the mentality that you're going to meet this person to eventually use them for some kind of career experience. Like, you just have to become friends with the end of it. And funnily enough, like when I happened at Motorola, it was because of networking with you. I met you at an event like a year prior, and then just kept in touch, and then that's how it worked out. So I think that's a very clear illustration of that type of. So,
right, and the trick is, it doesn't always work out. It's just a matter of knowing that these are things that we may not even see the connection down the line. It may take years before anything even happens. So like you said, just doing it genuinely and openly, and just trying to make a friend or learn.
well, we got a fat stack of questions here from the audience. So we have a question from Dasha Florov that says, what resources did you use while you brought your product to market, as you came across things that you didn't quite know about the process? Like, how did you teach yourself?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great question. So for me personally, what was the biggest teacher was actually coming from Motorola. Going through so much of the process at Motorola, and going through it with open eyes. And obviously this is contingent on me having that career, but it's really important that even as a junior designer, or wherever you might find yourself in the company, really keep your eyes and your ears open. It's a lot of times as designers, we close ourselves off in our bubble, and we do amazing design work, because sometimes you need that isolation to come up with great work. However, I think understanding how the business is moving, and looking at all the different facets, and really collaborating with the engineering team, and with procurement, and with marketing. I didn't do those things strategically. I just naturally like, communicating with the various disciplines. And when I launched my product, whenever I hit a part of the process that I was confused about, I would just ask myself, how did we do it at Motorola? And then I would scale it down, because that's a big company. So I would scale it much further down for myself. And that was sort of my guiding light there. But I also, I listened to a ton of podcasts. I watched a ton of YouTube videos. I did so much research, and I looked at other Kickstarter projects that had launched, and you can learn so much about how people, are positioning their products and themselves. And I think it's a combination of all of those things that was personally helped me.
So the learning does not stop at school. Next question, still regarding a bit of the Motorola experience, is from Adam Dimwa. And he says, when designing the Moto Z2, or as Canadians would say Z2, what kinds of research were done to inform the product before ideation began?
Yeah, so at Motorola, I'm trying to think, because we had a research division within within the consumer experience design department. And so a lot of times, this is, you're talking about a company that specifically launches phones year in, year out. So there's a ton of underlying research from even, you know, prior years, and a lot of times they get refreshed with new updated studies and things like that, around ergonomics and around you know, user testing. So a lot of the research that I was at least exposed to, or the research that I took part in, was really trying to understand, well, how might people use these various modular add-ons? And then oftentimes there would be you know, qualitative as well as quantitative research done, whether it's, you know, one-on-one sessions. We might have done, you know, a couple dozen one-on-one sessions with individuals to really just find out, like, what's your current, you know, life look like, you know, on the go, and what are some things that you wish, you know, your phone could do, all the way to you know, questionnaires that are passed out to you know, hundreds of participants, if not thousands. And then also a lot of the research that we would do quite a bit of testing. When we created certain concepts, we would prototype them and test them out, especially if we're trying to understand phone size or interaction. And I think that prototyping process was key to the research. So the researchers would work with the industrial designers to work with the model builders to create as many prototypes as possible, so that we could facilitate these conversations. We wanted to get to a point where somebody picks up the device and doesn't like it, or really likes it for one reason or the other, so that we could say, oh, and then take a note. And sometimes it was as a result of the model. You know, the model, it's rattling, this is low quality. But so we always have to refine the way that we conducted those studies.
I think too, the most interesting thing was that the research team would like integrate themselves into certain communities. Like, for example, go live in Brazil and India for like a week or two, just to see how people like use their phones on the day-to-day.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. The next question is from Nihal Ahrens, and he says, or she, I'm not actually sure, has your networking been majorly organic and in person, or does it rely a lot on social media or online? Could you shed some light on how and where you focused your energy and efforts?
Yeah, I think just short answer would be probably mostly organic and in person. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not the most active person on social media. I mean, I try to post every now and again, but I'm really not. And I think for the most part, at least initially, right? I mean, we're in a different situation right now. But you know, all things considered, I think so much of it was more of just this genuine, like, oh, there's a lecture happening at this design studio, or, you know, there's a talk happening over here, or, you know, this event is happening over there, and just actually wanting to check it out because, you know, maybe I learned about the speaker and I was really interested in what they had to say. So a lot of that is going to those events and trying to expand on my knowledge base, and learn from people that are a lot more experienced and a lot more knowledgeable in their fields. So I think that's where a lot of it was. And then having a great group of classmates and friends that are all sort of design nerds, and, you know, constantly, you know, letting you know about things you might not be aware of. That was hugely important for me. And I would say, you know, if you're in school, or if you know, if you keep in touch with your classmates and things like that, I mean, I think that's where a lot of the networking can start, because yeah, they may not run $1 million design agency, but they could at one day, you know, or at the very least, they could inform you about stuff that's happening around you that you can, you know, latch on to.
Cool. This one is about your alt pen experience. And so what was the most difficult experience you had with creating the alt pen? And that question comes from Carlos Felipe Duarte Briceño.
Okay. So the most difficult part of the pen, it's hard to say the most difficult because there were a lot of difficult parts.
How How about unforeseen challenge, like something that you probably didn't expect or what you learned from the process?
Okay. Well, I learned that it's difficult to do it all, and I learned that I suck at marketing and the that side of things, you know, and that was a side of things that I'm not gonna lie, I took for granted oftentimes. I would go, oh, the marketers are gonna tell us how to do our jobs again, you know, that type of thing. And then when I got a lot of respect for that industry, because you know, you can design the most amazing thing, but if you can't sell it, you know, it's unfortunate. So I think that was really it. It's just like the experience of like, wow, there are a lot of moving pieces here, and being able to work on all of that really just opening my eyes to how challenging it is. On a specific note, one of the things that was completely unforeseen, we had a recall. So I mean, you hear about Toyota and all these big companies having a failure in their product and then recalling.
Or the
And I had a recall. It was 180 units or so, which is a smaller unit than millions of units, but it was a lot for me, and I had to figure out how to deal with that and ship a good quality product. So I ended up having to ship it back to China and really go back and forth, and I learned about the importance of distribution of liability. Like it's got to be very clear who made the mistake and how was that documented, because I can't pay for fixing, shipping it overseas, getting it fixed, shipping it back, and repackaging. I can't pay for that if I didn't make that mistake. So being able to document your process and what's happening and who is saying what on paper in writing is very helpful, because then you can go and say, listen, you guys are at fault here. Here are the reasons why this wasn't designed to spec. So fix it, you know, and that was a learning experience for me. And it was great. I mean, it worked out, all things considered, but oh, that one hurt.
So you said your weakness, or I guess the hard part for you is marketing. A question here from Josh Hoffield is, what's the best way to market yourself?
So for me, the best way, and because marketing is so challenging for me, the best way to market myself, I think, it always comes down to the work that I do, and that's really important. And I know, like, you know, you're not just gonna do work and it's gonna speak for itself. You kind of have to push it, right? You have to share it. You have to talk about it. You have to engage with the broader community. So that's all part of it, but also just making sure that I'm doing work that I want to talk about, that I'm proud to share with the community, those types of things, because I'm not the guy that can make cold calls and send random emails and say, hey, is your business lacking innovation? Well, you know, I can't do that. I've tried it and it doesn't work for me. No one returns my calls. So I just found that, man, when I put the work out there and I share it, and it's really good quality work, like deep, not just throwing a sketch, not just shooting a render, but actually going deep, and putting the extra. I mean, you know, we can do sketches and renderings in a matter of hours or maybe a couple of days, but actually creating a story, sometimes it takes a lot longer. And I've found that going to that level of depth, that's been really key for me. So unfortunately, I don't have a method. I don't, you know, I don't know who to send this stuff to that can bring in, you know, work. But I think also just knowing that it's not going to be immediate, and sometimes someone has to see the thing, you know, 2 years ago to realize that they want to work with you, you know, in the future. So don't you know, put the work out there expecting results. Put the work out there because you want to put the work out there, and it may be a slow time, but you know, that's why you got to start early. You got to start yesterday, you know, so that these things can manifest.
And then the next few questions we have here are just regarding, you know, running your own studio, what that's like. And so one question here is, how important do you think consultancy experience is for starting your own company? And do you think it's possible to transition straight from the corporate world to kind of founder, which I guess is kind of what you did yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the way that I like to take things in bite-sized chunks. I like to scale things down to be at my level. That way I have realistic expectations of myself and my trajectory. So when starting this business, I didn't really think about like, you know, how big it needs to be. I just, initially it was just thinking about how to generate a regular income so I could feed myself, essentially. But I think the transition from corporate or consulting, I don't think that matters so much for me. I mean, the things that I was able to bring from working at Motorola, I think was a lot of that self-confidence that made me not afraid to work with clients on a deeper level, right? You know, I did some freelance projects as a student, and I was always terrified of going deeper. I don't know anything about manufacturing. I can do sketches, I can do CAD, but no manufacturing, you know? So, but I realized that the more that you can do as a service provider, you know, in terms of depth for a project, the more revenue that you can pull in. So working at the corporate gave me that level of depth and that confidence to say, listen, I can work with you further than just the initial design phase. We can actually go deeper and make sure that this is something that we're proud of. But I do think that consulting experience was important to see how is time divided amongst the various team members, how are proposals made, and how are pitches done. Those were all important because I find myself giving pitches and drafting proposals quite a bit. I mean, obviously more than actually. I draft a lot more proposals than the work that I get, because you know you may have to you may have to get 10 inquiries for one to stick. You know what I mean? So it's been good practice, but working and interning at those various locations where I may sometimes I maybe take a peek at a proposal. Maybe I wasn't supposed to see it, but I saw it, and then I'm like, oh, so this is how billing works, you know? So it's really just keeping your eyes and ears open at wherever you're working now. And I think even if it's not even design related, there's a lot that can be learned from working at various companies, because it's a business.
Yeah, kind of related to that, I guess, prior to the transition, there's kind of two similar questions here. At what point in your career did you actively start working on your personal time? So this person says, I've only been a few months into my first full-time job and find it hard to manage my time effectively, I think, between the two. The second question here is, why did you end up leaving Motorola? So I think they probably kind of flow into each other timeline-wise.
Okay. Okay, so let's talking about the managing time. Yes, I think that's a great point, and I think that's actually something I wanted to touch on my presentation, but I missed it. So I'm glad that you asked that question. It's your priority should be doing good quality work. Like because maybe if you're going to work on your personal project and neglect your full-time job, then you may be investing in your portfolio, but now you're doing the opposite for your network. And your boss is going to be like, you know what, this guy his or her heart is not into what they're working on. Okay, so in the beginning, I absolutely say you need to be invested in that business, in that company. I don't care if it's designing toothpicks. You have to put your heart and everything into what you're doing, so that you can prove to people that you know you're a good fit, and that you care and take pride in the work that you're doing. So that's really number one, is get yourself to a point where it becomes natural, where you're not constantly underwater because of your skill set. You know, you know how the business works, and you can operate within it. This whole talk about, and the reason I phrased it as investments is because it takes time. So be strategic about it and know that, okay, maybe I might do a few years here before I'm even able to start putting some of that specifically into myself. So understand that it's a journey, and just to appreciate the journey at every particular point that you're in. And then to the second part of why I left Motorola, it comes down to a couple of those reasons of why I started the Alt Pen project in the beginning. so I had that idea of launching Alt Pen, and it was getting to the point where I couldn't get it out of my mind. And obviously, I don't need to quit the job to do that full time, to do that. But because I wanted to launch it and actually launch a consulting business on the side and also teach and all of this type of thing, I found that doing all of that and then maintaining a good relationship with my work partners was going to be hard. Something was going to suffer, and I didn't want my work at Motorola to suffer. I wanted to leave on a positive note. Yeah, Rotimi, he worked hard. He was good. You know, I didn't want it to be, oh, he didn't care about his job because he was into other things. Okay. So that was one of the big reasons. It was really driven by some of the projects and some of the things that we're developing. But then, like I said, it was also good timing. It was just the timing. I was living with my parents. Student loans were almost paid off at the time, and I was just saving money, and it was the right time to take a risk. And I didn't know when I didn't want the risks that I was taking to be when I have, you know, an apartment and I have rent and I have bills and a car and all this stuff, and I'm quitting a solid job to go into the unknown. So for me, the timing was just it. And that kind of accelerated the fire. I intended on staying, you know, at least a year or two longer at Motorola at the very least. But once, you know, you got that nagging feeling at the back of my mind, I just I couldn't shake it. So I was like, my work is going to suffer if I don't move on.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think like you can't overextend yourself because then the other areas start to suffer because you're only one person. So you got to really focus on that which you're most interested in and what you think will give the most opportunity for growth.
Right.
This question's kind of related to that. So as a designer, how do you beat burnout and mental exhaustion? How do you keep your fuel? How do you fuel and how do you keep yourself motivated?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I mean, it's a great question because it's something I deal with in cycles. You know, sometimes I'm so pumped and I'm just going through it, you know, for months, and then, you know, then I hit like, and I'm just jaded and everything pisses me off, and you know, but I think moving away from the finding ways of detaching from the work. And this is almost a selfish answer because I know I've heard a lot of older designers talk about this and talk about work-life balance and all this stuff. But when I was starting my career, there was no work-life balance. It was as much work as possible. And I feel like that initial investment has gotten to me to the point now I'm still doing a hell of a lot of work, but I have my weekends now. Before I used to work every single weekend, every single day. Now I actually have my weekend, and I think it's because of that initial investment. So I'm doing projects, you know, helping my girlfriend or my dad with things that they're working on. And, you know, I love designing. I would love to continue doing that on the weekend, but being able to detach has helped me at least, you know, while I'm not thinking about design. It used to bother me, like, with the notion to not think about design for an hour. That was crazy. Like, no, you have to eat, sleep, drink design. But I think after doing it for so long, I built up the mileage. I built up, you know, the techniques, and they've just gotten a little bit faster and more efficient. And I think that's part of my comment about in growing my business. I've also been trying to engage with more freelancers. And I'm working with an intern this summer. I worked with one last summer and the previous summer. So I've been trying to just sort of engage the people that I work with so that could also, you know, offload my workload while giving someone else an opportunity. So I realize that's maybe specific for the situation that I'm currently in. But I think, yeah, finding ways of detaching from the work and then constantly reminding yourself why it is that you're doing this. Because sometimes things, maybe it's not as exciting a project, or maybe it's dragging or things like that. And just remind yourself, why is it that I'm doing this? And sometimes I find a little bit more energy from that. But, you know, I get burnt out every now and again, and I just deal with it. I take some naps. You know, when I, you know, hopefully, you know, there's always a down period. So I embrace the work when it's busy, and then when it stops being busy, I sleep. I watch catch up on my shows. I eat potato chips and and then I recoup. Then when I get sick and tired of doing that, then I'm ready to work again. And I don't do that for extended periods of time, but maybe a few days, and just yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have a great answer for that.
No, I think that sounds great. Like, just stop thinking about design sometimes. Like I
Yeah.
like I will take a break from design.
Yeah, but sometimes it has to be after the storm, because sometimes you can't just say I'm going to stop and then the client still has you're in the middle of a project, so that can feel like your hands are tied in those instances. So try to find ways of enjoying the various aspects and powering through it. Also one more thing. Sometimes it helps to limit the amount of things that I try to do. I used to have like 3 or 4 post-it notes of lists, things I got to do today, and I would only accomplish 2 or 3 on that list, and it was the most defeating feeling ever. Now I only put 3 or 4 things on my list, so that's all I need to accomplish. Before, I used to have 10, 12 things, and but it's everything is urgent. Every client needs it yesterday, so yeah, it's not always as urgent, as critical as it needs to be. And sometimes you have to let them know. As long as you let them know, sometimes I get proposals, oh, we really needed it last week, and I'm like, okay, well, I can give it to you in 2 weeks. And that's how the process works. Here's my process. This is, and then I try to explain and pitch it to them in a way where it's value. It's not just like I'm trying to waste time here.
I think it's the biggest. That's a really hard thing to explain to people that even may not necessarily understand design, is that it's like a process. You don't just like get the end product immediately. The next question is from Darren F, and he says, "Thank you so much for the awesome presentation. And as you mature in your career, do you find yourself spending more time on the business side of work rather than the design side? And if so, how do you find a balance between the two and keep your energy behind the creativity?"
Yeah, that's a great question. I have found spending a lot more time on the business side and than on the design side. And I think it's coming at a decent point in my career, because I've also found that the amount of time it takes me to do things is so much less now. I mean, it's magnitudes. I'm a lot faster than I was just 3 years or 4 years or 5 years ago. So all of that has just made a natural transition. So while I used to spend, let's say maybe it'll take 100 hours for me to complete a project before, and this is just hypothetical, it may now only take me about 30 hours to complete that same project. I found that now that naturally just gives me more time to do the business side of things. And obviously with the business side and everything that comes with that, that's occupying the time, and I have to force and carve out moments to sketch and to design, because that's still the creative work. That's still what is most exciting to me. But I also realized, listen, if I'm going to grow this business, and if I'm going to be able to afford having more interns and working with more people, then I need to focus a lot of energy on the business side. And so, working with interns and collaborating with freelancers and other designers, that has been helpful, because I still get to be very creative with putting in my ideas and throwing them out, but also there's a lot more conversation, which is really nice. Having people to bounce things off of. It's not just you and your because there's a lot more pressure when it's just you alone, where it's like, oh shoot, client needs these 30 concepts, blah blah blah. But when it's someone else, you can split the work and you can exchange and things like that. So I found that that's been helpful, and that's honestly that's where the business is right now, is me figuring out how can I do more of this, how can I afford to work with more designers, respectively in their sort of areas of expertise.
And then this one is also actually kind of related to that. From Tristan Canan, he says, as an independent designer, how do you ensure you're earning as much as you would from an ID mentor or ID team in a full-time position? As in if your own studio, you kind of work in isolation, so how do you have that same kind of dialogue?
Yeah, no, great question, Tristan. Let's see. Well, I mean, I still have mentors, like it may not be my boss at that, company, but like I said, a couple of my clients have actually served as amazing mentors. Some of the clients that launch product on on a near monthly basis. Sometimes I just like, how did you do that? What's going on? And because some of these are smaller companies, they're very willing and able to discuss that with me. And sometimes it's really casual. I didn't go up to them and say, hey, be my mentor. But I find that I'm getting mentors from just random places, people that aren't designers, and that's been really amazing, because when building a business, it's nice to have business mentors, or people that are on the opposite spectrum, going to conferences and engaging in various workshops and things like that. But also, like I said, when I brought on my first interns, that was a new experience for me. I didn't expect on doing that so soon, and then bringing on freelancers that are very skilled in what they do. There's a lot of conversation from that. So the conversation changes from this is my voice, this is my agency, and it changes into this is our voice, our agency, and a lot of times everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses, but we can really play off of each other and just have a dialogue. And I think the ability to balance, even if it's just one person, sometimes that helps. And having various experiences. Sometimes I might work with a furniture designer on something non-furniture related, and sometimes that's a fresh a fresh perspective, and just amazing ideas can come from that. So yeah, I think it's finding mentors in random locations, I guess, and building out a team.
All right, we got one last question here from Jasmine Kent, and it says, as a freelancer, how do you structure your contracts and NDAs when it comes to choosing between licensing, work for hire, and royalties?
Okay, great question. I think it really depends on the situation. For royalty based, or licensing or things like that, I mean, it really, like, nothing beats cash upfront, in my opinion. If you think about it, if it's a really good royalty agreement, that could be amazing, right? Because it could bring in revenue over a period of time, and that's great. But with situations that are outside of our economy, look at COVID-19. Not every business is going to last long enough to pay you out in full for your royalties. So, and I've been, and let me just say that my opinions and my understanding of all of this stuff changes very dynamically. So I might look back at this video and then have a completely different opinion. So I want to just say out there that this is not like a definitive answer. But today, nothing beats cash, upfront. It really depends on the project. If it's exciting and the client isn't able to, bear the budget, all in one or a couple of payments, then we figure out maybe the royalty can work out. And I'm open to that. If it's the right client with the right track record. If they haven't got anything to show for their success or previous success, I don't want to work with them based on royalty, because then it's just like, oh, well, when it's successful, you'll be rich. And that's a red flag to me, because you've not done anything to be successful in the past. So I don't want to open that can of worms. And so in terms of, structuring my agreement, I mean, I have my own NDA, and typically I'll work with other clients. Some of the clients have their own structures, and I just try to make sure I don't mind signing what the client gives me to sign, as long as it's mutually beneficial and protective, because I understand that this is a highly protective industry. So I don't know if I'm probably missing something in that question. It's a pretty heavy one.
Yeah, I mean, just choosing how you want to get paid. I think you got most of it. Structuring your contracts, I mean, that's a really deep question there. I guess to that end, like, what are some quick tips you have for writing a contract? Like, for example, making sure you don't get stuck doing endless revisions or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been trying to do more of is just communicating to the client what the scope of the work is. Like, what is this money that you're paying for? What does it actually cover? And what, you know, and then making sure it's clear that anything outside of that scope, let's just charge it on an hourly basis, you know, because I tend to give more of a flat rate per project. You know, it depends on the situation. But there are some projects that have a question mark. You know, we're developing this new thing. We have no idea. It's not going to be 3 months of work. It could be a year of work. So in those instances, you know, hourly works best. So if it's like an agreement that's like, hey, let's this is the overall, this is the budget, this is what you can expect to pay. Communicating with the client that, listen, if this goes out of scope, we switch to an hourly basis. That way, whether it's 1 hour of work or 10 or 30, or, you know, I'm compensated essentially.
Great. All right. Well, that's pretty much all we have there. Thanks a lot for your time, Rotimi. That was super informative.
Yeah, no, thank you guys, and thanks for hosting. Thanks for having me. Advanced Design. It's been great. I hope everyone got something out of this. And thank you guys for the great questions. So no, there's one anonymous attendee. Was Dam a good intern at Motorola?
So that question.
No, that was a good intern. Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily based on what I would say. I think it's also the other designers. They spoke well of you. So
Oh, that's good.
yeah.
I'm glad to hear. All right. Well, that about wraps up, everyone. 2 final notes. Remember to go vote for Rotimi's alt pen. Really important that we secure that award. And want to continue the discussion, the link to the After Lens session has been sent to your email, so check it out and keep talking. All right. Well, you're the host.
Thanks.
So end it.
All right. Cheers.
All right.
See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.